On December 4, 1991, the most famous airline in the world made its final landing. No single crash killed Pan American World Airways. No single scandal. An airline that once served 62 countries, that transformed a mail run from Key West to Havana into a global empire, simply ceased to exist. The fatal collapse didn't begin with a terrorist bomb or a bankruptcy filing. It began decades earlier with a $437 million mistake that was supposed to save everything. To understand how Pan Am died, you have to understand who built it and why. In October 1927, a single-engine Fairchild floatplane took off from Key West, Florida, carrying U.S. mail to Havana, Cuba. This 90-mile flight was the official birth of Pan American Airways. The man behind the operation was Juan Trippe, a 28-year-old Yale graduate who viewed aviation as an instrument of global influence. Trippe did not want to run a domestic carrier. Instead, he designed Pan Am to operate as America's unofficial international flag carrier. He negotiated landing rights directly with foreign governments, bypassing traditional business routes to conduct corporate diplomacy like a head of state. By securing early monopolies across Latin America, Trippe established a specific institutional blueprint. The airline became an extension of American foreign policy, protected by Washington and insulated from domestic competition. From its first day of operation, Pan Am was built for international prestige and political access. But this global design carried a hidden vulnerability. It left the airline dependent on foreign markets, with no domestic foundation to support it. On November 22, 1935, Pan Am translated its political insulation into unmatched physical reach. A four-engine Martin M130 flying boat, registered as NC14716 and christened the China Clipper, lifted off from San Francisco Bay. 6 days later, it completed the first scheduled commercial air crossing of the Pacific, delivering over 100,000 pieces of mail to Manila. By using the world's oceans instead of costly land runways, Pan Am bypassed international infrastructure limitations entirely. The legendary flying boat era had begun. Massive Sikorsky S-42s and double-decked Boeing 314 Clippers became floating palaces of mahogany, overnight berths, and 5-course silver service meals, linking distant continents with unprecedented luxury. By 1945, this unparalleled network spanning 60,000 route miles made Pan Am the undisputed sovereign of global commercial aviation. The carrier functioned as an unofficial arm of American foreign policy, projecting an illusion of permanent, untouchable dominance. But this high-prestige empire was built upon a highly restrictive regulatory compromise, and the real damage to its foundation had not even started yet. In April 1966, Juan Trippe bypassed standard corporate caution and committed $525 million to purchase 25 Boeing 747s. At the time of the order, the aircraft did not even exist. Boeing had not yet built a single prototype, let alone drafted final blueprints. Trippe had personally pressured Boeing President Bill Allen to construct the double-decker giant, wagering the airline's long-term survival on an unprecedented leap in physical scale. Trippe believed the giant jet would slash seat costs by 30%, transforming international travel into a mass-market commodity. On January 22, 1970, Pan Am Flight 2 departed New York's JFK Airport for London Heathrow, officially inaugurating the commercial jumbo jet era. To the traveling public, this massive aircraft made Pan Am appear completely unstoppable, cementing its reputation as the ultimate sovereign of global aviation. But this triumph of scale carried a quiet, devastating financial reality. Trippe's aggressive gamble locked the airline into immense capital exposure and high-interest debt just as the global economy prepared to turn. The very fleet designed to secure Pan Am's future had instead anchored the carrier to massive, inflexible, fixed operating costs that it could not easily escape. The Civil Aeronautics Act of 1938 established a regulatory barrier that would quietly dictate Pan Am's eventual demise. Section 401 of the Act required airlines to hold a certificate of public convenience and necessity, and the Civil Aeronautics Board restricted Pan Am exclusively to international routes. This meant the carrier was legally barred from operating a domestic network. while competitors like United and TWA funneled passengers from Chicago, Cleveland, and Atlanta directly into their own transoceanic flights, Pan Am had no internal feeder system. It relied entirely on other domestic airlines to deliver travelers to its coastal gateways in New York, Miami, and San Francisco. This structural gap remained largely hidden during the decades of regulated monopolies when international travel demand outpaced capacity. But it left Pan Am without the resilient, high-yield domestic base its rivals used to cushion international losses, creating an operational vulnerability that would prove impossible to correct. In October 1973, the OPEC oil embargo struck, sending global jet fuel prices soaring. Pan Am's massive fleet of newly purchased Boeing 747s, designed for high-capacity mass transit, became an immense financial burden overnight. These double-decker giants consumed vast amounts of fuel, yet the airline's rigid international route structures forced them to fly with empty seats. 5 years later, the regulatory shield that had protected the carrier since 1938 dissolved entirely. In October 1978, the passage of the Airline Deregulation Act dismantled federal control over domestic routes, ticket prices, and market entry. Aggressive, low-cost domestic competitors surged into the skies. These nimble rivals built efficient hub-and-spoke networks across the United States, funneling domestic travelers directly into their own expanding international flights. Pan Am, stranded at coastal gateways like New York, Miami, and San Francisco without an internal feeder system to support its transoceanic runs, watched its customer base evaporate. The changing market instantly exposed the airline's pre-existing structural weakness. To avoid collapse, the proud international flag carrier had to acquire a domestic network, and fast. But the real damage hadn't even started yet. In January 1980, Pan Am completed the purchase of Miami-based National Airlines for $437 million. The transaction, funded largely through high-interest junk bonds, was designed as a rapid solution to the domestic feeder gap. By absorbing National's domestic routes, aircraft, and workforce, Pan Am expected to funnel passengers directly from American cities into its long-haul international flights. Instead, the acquisition became a self-inflicted financial disaster. The acquisition price was severely overvalued, adding $300 million of additional debt to Pan Am's already weak capital structure. Beyond the debt, the operational and cultural assimilation of the two carriers quickly turned into a logistical nightmare. National's fleet consisted primarily of narrow-body Boeing 727 and 737 aircraft, whereas Pan Am's fleet was built around wide-body Boeing 747s and DC-10s. The maintenance procedures, spare parts inventories, and mechanical tooling for these planes did not match. Training programs and crew scheduling platforms had to be run separately, forcing Pan Am to fund parallel operating systems that wiped out any expected cost savings. At the same time, company cultures and labor forces clashed. National's informal, low-fare identity conflicted with Pan Am's prestigious international brand. Labor unions on both sides locked into intense disputes over seniority lists and wages. To secure labor agreements, Pan Am agreed to raise National's unionized pilot salaries to match its own higher scales. This single concession triggered a massive, immediate spike in payroll expenses without producing any new revenue. The anticipated domestic feed never materialized. By late 1980, the merged airline was laboring to manage its debt and route overlaps, posting an operating loss of $126.9 million for the year. Instead of protecting the carrier from the pressures of deregulation, the $437 million purchase drained essential cash reserves and accelerated the company's financial bleeding. Pan Am had chosen the wrong rescue, and the trap was now set. In August 1981, C.E. Acker took over as president of Pan Am. He operated as a corporate liquidator, executing a survival strategy that kept the airline afloat by systematically dismantling the very assets that defined its global empire. This strategy exchanged long-term strategic strength for immediate cash. The liquidation began with the crown jewel of the company's real estate portfolio. In 1981, Pan Am sold its 59-story headquarters building at 200 Park Avenue to Metropolitan Life Insurance Company for $400 million. While the Pan Am name remained on the facade, the transaction was a stark admission of operational insolvency. That same year, Acker sold the airline's highly profitable hospitality subsidiary, Intercontinental Hotels, to British conglomerate Grand Metropolitan for $500 million, ending 35 years of direct hotel ownership and earmarking $163 million of the proceeds for immediate debt repayment. These sales injected nearly $1 billion of immediate liquidity, but they did nothing to fix the structural deficit. The reality of Pan Am's failing model became clear when the airline posted a record $485.3 million loss for the 1982 fiscal year, the largest single-year deficit in U.S. aviation history up to that point. Driven by intense fare wars, high jet fuel prices, and the lingering effects of labor strikes, this operating deficit instantly wiped out the cash generated by the previous year's asset sales. With cash reserves depleted, Acker targeted the core international network. In April 1985, Pan Am sold its historic Pacific division to United Airlines for $750 million. Widely noted as the largest transaction in civil aviation history at the time, United acquired 25% of Pan Am's entire route system, including its Tokyo Narita hub, 25 long-range aircraft, and nearly 3,000 employees. By selling the Pacific division, Pan Am surrendered its historic gateway to Asia, trading its future growth potential for temporary balance sheet relief. Each transaction bought time, but the strategy was structurally unsustainable. Pan Am was staying alive by consuming itself, trading its strongest assets for short-term operational cash, and leaving behind a fragile, Atlantic-only carrier with no margin for error. But the real damage hadn't even started yet. On December 5, 1988, the United States Embassy in Helsinki, Finland, received an anonymous warning. The caller stated that a Pan-American flight from Frankfurt to the United States would be targeted by a bomb. The alert was circulated to aviation security officials, but no decisive action was taken to ground flights. 16 days later, on December 21st, Pan Am Flight 103, a Boeing 747 named Clipper Maid of the Seas, took off from London Heathrow bound for New York. At 7:03 p.m., while cruising at 31,000 feet, a detonator triggered. Hidden inside a Toshiba radio cassette player within a shipping container in the forward cargo hold, a small charge of Czech-made Semtex plastic explosive tore a 20-inch hole in the left side of the fuselage. The rapid decompression ripped the aircraft apart in seconds. The wreckage fell over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing all 259 people on board and 11 on the ground. Among the 270 dead were 190 Americans. For an airline already hollowed out by debt, the catastrophe was a mortal blow. It was not the sole cause of Pan Am's collapse, but it functioned as a devastating accelerant. The tragedy instantly shattered public trust in the iconic Blue Globe. Transatlantic bookings plummeted as passengers avoided the carrier. Facing rising insurance premiums, massive civil lawsuits from victims' families, and a damaged reputation, Pan Am's fragile Atlantic network could no longer generate the cash needed to survive. In 1989, Pan Am attempted a desperate strategic escape, negotiating a merger with Northwest Airlines. The talks collapsed, leaving the carrier entirely isolated. 10 months later, in August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. The resulting geopolitical crisis triggered a sudden spike in jet fuel prices and a swift drop in international travel. Pan Am's remaining cash reserves evaporated. On January 8, 1991, after posting a $662.9 million loss for the previous fiscal year, Pan Am filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. To secure enough immediate liquidity to keep a fraction of its fleet in the air, the bankrupt carrier began carving up its remaining network. Delta Airlines stepped in, purchasing Pan Am's historic transatlantic routes, its Frankfurt hub, and its European operations for $1.39 billion. The transaction provided temporary support, but it stripped the pioneer of international flight of its last profitable business. Pan Am was reduced to a domestic shell, running out of assets, running out of cash, and running out of time. On the morning of December 4th, 1991, the last scheduled flight in the history of Pan American World Airways departed from Bridgetown, Barbados. Flight 436, operated by a Boeing 727 named the Clipper Goodwill, carried the remaining weight of a global pioneer as it flew north toward Florida. In the cockpit was Captain Mark Pyle. He held the responsibility of guiding the airline to its ultimate destination. As the aircraft approached Miami International Airport, air traffic controllers cleared the flight for its last landing. Pyle brought the jet down, the tires striking the concrete at 2:01 p.m., bringing 64 years of continuous operations to a close. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, airport fire trucks lined the tarmac, throwing a giant water cannon salute over the blue and white fuselage. After completing the last checklist and shutting down the engines, Pyle spoke to reporters waiting on the ground. When asked to summarize the moment, he offered a single, quiet word: outstanding. The blue globe had at last stopped spinning. Today, Pan Am's ghost still haunts modern boardrooms, a stark warning that corporate prestige cannot shield systemic rot. Its legacy proves that no giant is truly untouchability. Ultimately, the Blue Globe taught us a chilling lesson. Believing in your own invincibility breeds the very blindness that kills empires. What giant do you think is next? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more corporate autopsies.